The starship Endeavour moved slowly through the darkness of space. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the front of the ship and looked through the large window. What he saw made his heart beat faster. A space station bigger than anything humans had ever built floated before them. It was made of shining metals and strange crystals that glowed with soft light. This was the home of the Galactic Concil, where aliens from 300 different worlds came together to make decisions about the galaxy. Standing next to Daniel was Ambassador Lisa Morgan. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. In her hands, she held a folder full of papers and speeches she had prepared for this moment. Humanity had worked for years to reach this day. They had received a message from space telling them to come here. The aliens wanted to meet the humans and decide if they were good enough to join the galactic community. The Endeavour docked at the station with a soft bump. Daniel and Lisa walked down the ramp with 20 other humans behind them. They were the best Earth had to offer. Scientists, diplomats, military officers, and artists. All of them had been chosen to represent their species. Alien guards met them at the entrance. These creatures were tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. They did not speak but simply pointed down a long corridor. The humans followed in silence. As they walked, Lisa noticed other aliens stopping to stare at them. Some of the creatures were small and furry. Others were made of what looked like living rock. A few seemed to be clouds of colored gas floating inside glass containers. All of them looked at the humans with strange expressions. Lisa thought she saw pity in their eyes, but she was not sure. The corridor opened into a massive room. It was shaped like a bowl, with thousands of seats rising up on all sides. In each seat sat an alien representing their world. At the center of the room was a small platform where the humans were told to stand. Lisa looked up at the aliens surrounding them. She felt very small. These beings had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. Their technology was beyond anything Earth could imagine. Their civilizations were older than human history itself. A loud voice filled the room. It came from an old alien sitting on a raised platform above the others. He was a Dralith, a reptile-like creature with silver scales and yellow eyes. His name was High Arbiter Zethros, and he was the leader of the council. "You are the species called human," Zethros said through a translator device. His real voice was a series of hisses and clicks, but the machine turned it into flat English words. "You come from the planet Earth in the Sol system. You have been called here to ask for membership in the Galactic Concil. You may speak." Lisa stepped forward. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. She had practiced this speech 100 times. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she began. "We are honored to be here. Humanity has dreamed of meeting other intelligent life for thousands of years. We come in peace and friendship. We wish to learn from you and share what we know. We believe that together, all species can build a better future." She spoke for nearly an hour. She told them about human history, about their art and music and science. She spoke of their mistakes too, the wars and suffering, but also how they had learned from those dark times. She talked about human dreams and hopes, their desire to explore and understand the universe. When she finished, silence filled the great chamber. Lisa waited, hoping she had made a good impression. Then she heard a sound that needed no translation. Laughter. It started with a few aliens on the upper seats. Then it spread like fire through dry grass. Soon the entire chamber was filled with the sound of 300 species mocking the humans. Lisa felt her face grow hot with shame. Beside her, Daniel clenched his fist so hard his knuckles turned white. The other humans looked down at their feet, unable to meet the eyes of the laughing aliens. High Arbiter Zethros raised one clawed hand, and the laughter slowly died down. He looked at the humans with something that might have been pity. "You speak well," he said, "but your words cannot change what you are. Your species is only 200,000 years old. You have had space travel for less than 1,000 years. The youngest member of this council discovered faster-than-light travel 40,000 years before your planet was even formed." He paused to let his words sink in. "You speak of peace, but your own history shows endless wars. You fought each other over land, over ideas, over the color of your skin. You nearly destroyed your own world with weapons and pollution. You are children playing at being adults. Lisa wanted to argue to defend her species, but she knew it would do no good. The council had already made up their minds. The council has made its decision, Zethros continued. Humanity is granted observer status only. You may watch our meetings. You may listen to our discussions. But you may not vote. You may not trade for advanced technology. You may not expand beyond your current space. These rules will stay in place until you prove you deserve more. The words hit Lisa like physical blows. Observer status. It was barely better than being ignored completely. Humanity had crossed the stars hoping to join a community of equals. Instead, they had found only scorn. We understand, Lisa said quietly. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. We accept your terms. For now, as the humans were led out of the chamber, Daniel noticed one alien watching them differently than the others. He was a Velthari, an insect-like creature with large compound eyes that sparkled like jewels. While everyone else had laughed, this one had stayed silent. He seemed to be studying the humans with great interest. The Endeavor departed from the station that evening. The crew was quiet during the journey home. They had left Earth with such hope and excitement. They returned with the weight of galactic rejection on their shoulders. But as Daniel sat alone in his cabin, he did not feel despair. He felt something else entirely. A fire was burning in his chest. Not anger, though there was some of that too. It was determination. The kind of determination that had driven humanity through ice ages and plagues, through world wars and disasters. The galaxy thought humans were nothing. They thought humanity would accept their place at the bottom and be grateful for it. They were wrong. Daniel pulled out a notebook and began to write. Plans, ideas, dreams. Humanity would prove the council wrong, not through war or threats, but through excellence. They would become something the galaxy had never seen before. It might take decades. It might take centuries. But one day, the same aliens who had laughed at humanity would look at them with respect. Daniel was sure of it. And somewhere deep in space, aboard the council station, the young Velthari ambassador named Kethis was thinking the same thing. He had studied many species in his career, but none had fascinated him like these humans. There was something in their eyes, even in their moment of greatest humiliation, something dangerous and beautiful. He would be watching them very carefully in the years to come. 50 years passed after that humiliating day at the Galactic Council. For the ancient alien races, 50 years was nothing. It was like a single breath in a long life. But for humanity, 50 years was enough time to change everything. The mockery of the council had done something unexpected. It had united the human race in a way that nothing else ever could. Old enemies became friends. Countries that had fought for centuries now worked together. All the energy that humans once spent on fighting each other was now pointed at a single goal. They would prove the galaxy wrong. On Mars, in a small laboratory built into the red rock, Dr. Kevin Park stared at his computer screen. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. His coffee had gone cold hours ago. He had been working on this problem for 20 years. 20 years of failures, of dead ends, of moments when he wanted to give up and go home. But tonight was different. Tonight, the numbers finally made sense. Kevin leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. His hands were shaking. On the screen in front of him was the solution to zero-point energy. It was a power source that the galaxy said was impossible to create efficiently. The alien races had tried for millions of years and failed. Kevin Park, a human scientist from a small town in Korea, had just succeeded. He did not celebrate. He simply picked up his phone and called Earth. There were people who needed to know about this right away. Similar breakthroughs were happening all across human space. On the moon, Dr. Maria Santos had invented a new kind of artificial gravity. The aliens used huge machines that ate enormous amounts of power to create gravity on their ships. Maria's device was small enough to fit in a backpack and used almost no energy at all. When she showed it to her team, they laughed with joy. Not the cruel laughter of the council, but the happy laughter of people who had achieved something wonderful. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, A former construction worker named Chris Taylor was changing how humans mined rocks in space. He had no fancy degree. He had learned his trade building houses in Nevada, but he understood how to break things apart and put them back together. His new mining techniques were 10 times faster than what the aliens used. Soon, human mining ships were pulling more metal from asteroids than they knew what to do with, and deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a facility that appeared on no maps, Admiral Patricia Wells was building something special. She was an old woman now, with white hair and a face full of wrinkles, but her mind was as sharp as ever, and her eyes still burned with the same fire that had filled them 50 years ago when the Council laughed at her species. Patricia had been a young officer on the Endeavor during that first contact. She had stood in the Great Chamber and heard the aliens mock everything humanity had achieved. She had sworn on that day that she would spend her life making sure it never happened again. The facility under the mountains was her life's work. Thousands of scientists and engineers worked there in secret. They were developing weapons, shields, and ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While the aliens refused to share their technology, humans had simply invented their own. And in many cases, they had done it better. But weapons were only part of Patricia's plan. She knew that humanity needed more than just military power. They needed information. They needed to understand how the galaxy really worked. That job fell to Ambassador Lisa Morgan. She was old now too, in her 80s, but she still attended every council session. She sat in the observer section and watched. She listened. She asked polite questions and smiled at the aliens who looked down on her. Most of them thought she was a harmless old woman who had accepted her species' place in the universe. They were very wrong. Every piece of information Lisa gathered was sent back to Earth. Analysts studied everything she learned. They built a complete picture of galactic politics. They discovered that the Council was not as united as it seemed. The Velthri had strong armies but weak economies. The Corvani controlled trade but had no soldiers. The Dralith were respected but their population was shrinking. Beneath the surface of galactic unity, there were cracks. Cracks that a clever species might use someday. Lisa's most valuable source was Ambassador Kethis. The Velthri, who had watched the humans so carefully on that first day, had become an important figure in galactic politics. Over the years, he and Lisa had developed a strange friendship. They met sometimes in quiet corners of the station, two old diplomats sharing thoughts about the universe. It was during one of these meetings that Kethis told Lisa something that changed everything. "The Council is afraid," he said. His insect eyes reflected the stars outside the window, not of you, but of what you represent. In millions of years of galactic history, no species has ever advanced as fast as yours. The elders do not understand how this is possible. They fear what they cannot understand. Lisa nodded slowly. She had suspected something like this. There is more, Kethis continued. Something is happening at the edge of known space. Strange signals. Colonies going silent. The Council is worried but cannot agree on what to do. Their internal fighting prevents any real action. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. What do you think is out there? Kethis was quiet for a long moment. I do not know. But I believe that when the answer comes, the galaxy will need species like yours. Species who can adapt quickly. Species who turn challenges into strength. He looked at her with those compound eyes that had watched humanity for 50 years. Your people were not wrong to feel shame that day in the council chamber. But you were also not wrong to feel determination. The galaxy judged you by what you were. They did not consider what you might become. That was their mistake. Lisa returned to Earth shortly after that conversation. She met with Patricia Wells in the secret facility under the mountains. She told her everything Kethis had said. Patricia listened without interrupting. When Lisa finished, the old admiral smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been preparing for bad news and was finally glad to know what shape it would take. Then we continue as planned, Patricia said. We keep building. We keep learning. And when the crisis comes, we will be ready. Above them, the stars turned slowly in the endless night of space. Somewhere out there, something was watching. Something was waiting. And humanity, for the first time in its history, was truly prepared for whatever the universe might throw at them. The 50 years of quiet work were almost over. The storm was coming, and humanity would face it not as the frightened children the Council had mocked, but as something new. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Something dangerous. The first attack came on a quiet Tuesday morning. The Corvani colony called Nexus 7 was a busy trading hub at the edge of Council space. 200,000 beings lived there, buying and selling goods from across the galaxy. Ships came and went every hour, carrying everything from rare metals to exotic foods. Then, without any warning, all communication from Nexus 7 stopped. The messages just ended. The ships stopped arriving. It was as if the entire colony had simply vanished. The Council sent a patrol ship to investigate. What they found terrified them. Where Nexus 7 had once stood, there was nothing. No buildings, no ships, no bodies. The entire colony had been erased from existence. All that remained was burned ground and a strange energy pattern that no one could identify. Within 1 month, 3 more colonies disappeared the same way, then 7 more, then 15. Fear spread through the galaxy like a disease. Species that had considered themselves safe for millions of years suddenly realized they were not safe at all. High Arbiter Zethros called an emergency meeting of the full Council. The great chamber that had once echoed with laughter at humanity was now filled with terror. Aliens argued and shouted at each other. The Corvani demanded that someone do something. The Velthari offered their warships but admitted their weapons seemed useless. The Dralith called for calm and study, but their voices shook with fear. No one knew what was attacking them. No one knew how to stop it. In the middle of all this chaos, Ambassador Lisa Morgan raised her hand and asked to speak. She was 93 years old now, and many of the aliens thought she was too old to say anything useful. But High Arbiter Zethros was desperate. He would listen to anyone who might have answers. "Speak," he said. Lisa walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Her body was old, but her voice was still strong. "Distinguished members of the Council," she began, "humanity has been watching these attacks very carefully. Our scientists have studied the energy patterns left behind at each colony. We believe we know what is attacking you." The chamber went silent. The primitive species that they had laughed at 50 years ago was claiming to have answers that the ancient races did not. Lisa touched a button on her wrist, and a holographic image appeared in the air above her. It showed strange patterns of light and energy. These patterns matched theoretical models that our physicists developed decades ago. We believe the attackers come from outside our dimension. They exist in a parallel reality that sometimes touches our own. When the connection is strong enough, they can reach through and consume everything they find. We call them the Hollow, because of the emptiness they leave behind. The Corvani representative made a sound of disbelief. "Impossible. Travel between dimensions is only a theory. No one has ever proved it can be done." Lisa smiled slightly. "With respect, faster-than-light travel was also just a theory once. Just because something has never been done does not mean it cannot be done." She continued her presentation. She explained what human scientists had learned about the Hollow, how they fed on matter and energy from other dimensions, how their technology worked, and most importantly, what their weaknesses might be. When she finished, the Velthari ambassador Kethis stood up. He was very old now, older than most of his species ever lived, but he still served the Council. "How is it that humans have theories about threats that none of us ever imagined?" he asked. Lisa turned to face him. They had been friends for 50 years, and she knew he was asking this question to help her, not challenge her. "Humans have always been fascinated by danger," she said. "Our stories are full of alien invasions and cosmic monsters and the end of the world. Where other species might think such ideas are foolish, we think they are useful. We have been imagining worst-case scenarios for centuries. It is part of who we are." High Arbiter Zethros leaned forward in his seat. His old scales rustled against the chair. "Even if your analysis is correct," he said, "what can we do about it? Our best weapons pass through the hollow ships like they are not even there. Our strongest shields do nothing to stop them." Lisa took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment 50 years of secret work had been building toward. Humanity has developed technologies that we believe can fight the Hollow, she said. We have weapons and shields and strategies that exist nowhere else in the galaxy. We are willing to share them and fight beside you. Hope flickered in the eyes of many aliens. But Lisa was not finished. However, she continued, we have conditions. The hope turned to shock. The primitive species was making demands. Name them, Zethros said quietly. First, humanity must be given full membership in the Council, with all rights and privileges. Second, all restrictions on human expansion must be removed. Third, we must have complete access to all galactic technology. And fourth, Lisa paused and looked around the chamber. We require a formal apology for how we were treated when we first came here. For a long moment, no one spoke. Some aliens looked angry. Others looked thoughtful. A few actually looked ashamed. Finally, Zethros nodded his great head. If humanity can do what you promise, he said, these terms are acceptable. But understand this. If you fail, your species will be blamed for the destruction of the galaxy. Lisa did not blink. She did not hesitate. She stood in the center of that great chamber, 93 years old, and faced down 300 civilizations. We will not fail, she said. Humanity never fails when it truly matters. Council voted that same day. Lisa's conditions were accepted. Humanity was no longer an observer. They were full members of the galactic community, with all the rights they had been denied for 50 years. But Lisa knew that rights meant nothing. If the Hollow destroyed everything, as she left the chamber, she sent a message to Admiral Patricia Wells back on Earth. It contained only 4 words. It is time to proceed. Under the Rocky Mountains, Patricia Wells read the message and smiled. She turned to her staff and gave the order they had been waiting decades to hear. Launch the fleet. All across human space, ships that had been hidden began to emerge. They were not like the sleek vessels of the alien races. They were rough and angular, built for function rather than beauty. But inside each ship was technology that no alien had ever seen. Weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Shields that could block attacks from other dimensions. Engines that moved in ways the laws of physics should not have allowed. Humanity was going to war. Not against each other this time. Not for land or power or revenge. They were going to war to save a galaxy that had laughed at them, and they were going to win. The combined fleet, gathered in the darkness of space near the coordinates, where scientists predicted the next Hollow attack would occur. It was the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. 2,000 vessels from 50 different species formed a great wall of metal and light. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were nervous. Many of them had seen recordings of what the Hollow did to colonies. They knew they might not survive this day. At the center of the formation sat the human fleet. Only 50 ships. They were smaller than most of the alien vessels around them. To the galactic commanders, they looked weak and unimpressive. Many had argued against giving humans such an important position in the battle line. Let the primitives fight at the edges, they said. Let the real warriors take the center. But Admiral Patricia Wells had refused to move. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Arizona, and watched the tactical display with calm eyes. At 71 years old, she had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. She was not going to hide at the back. All human ships report. Ready, said Commander Jake Nelson from his station. Defensive systems are online, added Lieutenant Sandra Phillips from the engineering. Consul Patricia nodded. She pressed a button to speak to the entire fleet. This is Admiral Wells to all vessels. When the Hollow arrive, maintain your positions and provide covering fire only. Human ships will engage the enemy directly. Do not break formation under any circumstances. Anyone who runs will be left behind. The alien commanders heard this message with disbelief. 50 human ships were going to attack an enemy that had destroyed entire colonies. It was suicide. It was madness. But Patricia knew something they did not. The secret facility under the Rocky Mountains had not been building ordinary weapons. Human scientists had spent 50 years studying physics in ways the aliens never had. They had discovered things about the nature of reality. that the ancient races had missed because they thought they already knew everything. The hollow arrived without warning. Reality itself seemed to tear open like cloth being ripped apart. Through the tear came ships that hurt the eyes to look at. They were made of angles that should not exist and shadows that moved on their own. There were hundreds of them, each one a nightmare given form. The alien fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons released their energy in a blinding wave of destruction. Beams of light, balls of plasma, missiles that moved faster than thought. All of it slammed into the hollow ships, and all of it passed through them like they were. Made of smoke, panic began to spread through the alien fleet. Their weapons were useless. The hollow were going to kill them all. Then the human ships activated their systems. The Arizona led the charge. Her experimental dimensional anchor created a field of energy that spread outward like ripples in a pond. Wherever the field touched a hollow ship, something changed. The nightmare vessels flickered and became solid. They were no longer phantoms. They were real targets. Other human ships fired their resonance weapons. These guns did not shoot normal energy. They shot vibrations tuned to the exact frequency of the hollow's existence. When the vibrations hit the enemy ships, the hollow began to fall apart. Their impossible angles collapsed. Their living shadows faded and died. The battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships flew directly into the heart of the hollow formation. They twisted and turned through enemy fire, their pilots performing moves that should have been impossible. The alien ships provided support, shooting at any hollow vessel that the human weapons had made solid. Patricia watched from the Arizona's bridge as ship after ship was destroyed. The hollow fought back with terrible power. Human vessels exploded in bright flashes of light. Good men and women died with every passing minute. Patricia knew many of them by name. She had trained some of them herself, but the humans did not retreat. They did not stop fighting. Every time a ship was destroyed, another moved to take its place. They pressed forward with a determination that the aliens had never seen before. Commander. Nelson was hit by flying debris when a console exploded near him. Lieutenant Phillips dragged him to safety, while still giving orders to her engineering team. The Arizona's shields failed twice. Twice the crew managed to bring them back online through sheer force of will. Finally, as the 6th hour ended, Patricia watched the last hollow ship collapse into a shower of strange particles. The dimensional tier closed. The nightmare was over. The Arizona floated in the middle of a field of wreckage. 27 human ships had been destroyed. 15 more were badly damaged. Nearly 3,000 human lives had been lost. But they had won. Patricia slumped in her command chair. She suddenly felt every one of her 71 years. Around her, the surviving bridge crew was crying and hugging each other. They could not believe they were still alive. "Admiral," said a communications officer, his voice shaking. "You need to see this." He put an image on the main screen. It showed the bridge of the Velthary flagship, where the combined alien command had been watching the battle. Beings from 100 different species stood in the picture. They were not talking or moving. They were simply standing there, facing the camera. Then slowly, they began to show respect in their own ways. The Velthary crossed their arms over their chests. The Corvani dimmed the light inside their gas containers. The Dralith lowered their great heads until their snouts nearly touched the floor. Every species had its own gesture. Every species was using it. They were bowing to humanity. "Hi, Arbiter." Zethris's voice came through the speakers, broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Today we have seen something that will be remembered forever," he said. "A species that we dismissed as primitive has saved us all. A species that we mocked and restricted has proven itself greater than we ever imagined. On behalf of the entire Galactic Council, I offer humanity our deepest thanks and our most sincere apology. You are not merely members of this council. You are its heroes." Patricia listened to these words. She thought of all the sacrifice that had brought them to this moment. The 50 years of secret work, the thousands who had died today. Lisa Morgan, who had endured decades of disrespect without ever losing hope. Kevin Park and Maria Santos and Chris Taylor and all the others who had given their lives to proving the galaxy wrong. Tell them, Patricia said to her communications officer, that we are not interested in praise. We are not interested in being heroes. We are interested in building something better, together. She looked out the window at the stars beyond. They seemed brighter somehow. As if the universe itself was celebrating, the Arizona turned slowly and began the long journey home. Behind her, the combined fleet followed. Ships from 50 species, traveling together, united by a battle that had changed everything. Humanity had come to the stars as children being judged by their elders. They returned as equals, as partners, as proof that potential cannot be measured by years alone. The galaxy would never look at them the same way again. 100 years had passed since humanity first stood before the Galactic Council and heard the sound of 300 species laughing at them. 100 years since Ambassador Lisa Morgan had promised that humans would accept the Council's harsh judgment only for now. Now, in that same great chamber, another human was preparing to speak. His name was Christopher Hayes. He was the great-grandson of Captain Daniel Hayes, who had commanded the Endeavour on that first historic journey. Christopher had grown up hearing stories about that day. Stories about the shame and the determination. Stories about the long years of quiet work that followed. The chamber looked different now. There were more seats than before, filled with species that had once been considered too primitive for membership. After humanity had proved that new species could accomplish great things, the Council had changed its rules. Now, over 400 worlds were represented here. Christopher looked up at the seat of the High Arbiter. It was occupied by a human woman named Selena Wells. She was Patricia Wells's granddaughter, and she was the first human to lead the Galactic Council. Her grandmother had saved the galaxy with weapons. Selena guided it with wisdom. The old Velthary ambassador Kethis was still there too. He was incredibly ancient now, far older than any Velthary had ever lived before. Many believed it was his friendship with humans that kept him going. He wanted to see how their story would end. Christopher walked to the center of the chamber and began to speak. "Distinguished members," he said, "I have not come here today to talk about trade agreements or territorial disputes. I have come to tell you a story." The chamber grew quiet. Humans and their stories had become famous across the galaxy. They had a way of speaking that touched something deep in beings of every species. 100 years ago, my great-grandfather stood in this very spot. He watched as the galaxy laughed at his species. He was told that humans were too young, too violent, too primitive to deserve respect. He was told that Earth would never be more than a footnote in galactic history. Christopher paused and looked around at the assembled faces. He could have responded to that judgment with anger. He could have given up and accepted that humanity would always be at the bottom. Instead, he responded with determination. He and his entire generation decided that they would prove the galaxy wrong, not through conquest, not through violence, but through excellence. He took a few steps, his voice growing stronger. That determination did not come from pride or arrogance. It came from something fundamental to our species. Humans are transformed by challenge. We are made stronger by adversity. When you told us we were nothing, you gave us the greatest gift possible. You gave us motivation. Some of the older aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They remembered those days. They remembered laughing. But here's the truth that this past century has revealed, Christopher continued. You were not entirely wrong about us. When you met us, we were indeed primitive. We were violent. We were divided against ourselves. What you failed to see was our capacity for change. Humans are not defined by what we are today. We are defined by what we are becoming. Our potential is not fixed. It is infinite. He looked up at High Arbiter Selena Wells. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. The galaxy that exists today is better than the one that existed 100 years ago. Not because humanity saved you from the hollow, though we are proud of that. It is better because in fighting together, we all grew. The Velthary learned that military power alone cannot keep a civilization safe. The Corvani discovered that true wealth comes from sharing ideas, not hoarding them. The Draelith found that wisdom means knowing when to change old ways. Christopher spread his hands wide. This is humanity's true gift to the galaxy, not our technology, not our weapons. Our example. Any species, no matter how young or how old, can transform itself. Any civilization can overcome its limitations. All it takes is the will to try and the refusal to believe that tomorrow must be the same as today. In the observer section, a group of newly contacted species watched with fascination. They had been found just decades ago. Living in conditions similar to ancient Earth, the old council would have made them wait thousands of years for membership. The new council, influenced by humanity's example, had welcomed them immediately. 100 years ago, you laughed at us, Christopher said. Today, we stand beside you as equals and friends. What will the next 100 years bring? What will we accomplish together? I do not know. But I believe it will be something wonderful, because the future is not written yet. And humans have always believed that the best stories are the ones we have not yet told. He stepped back from the speaking platform. For a moment the chamber was silent, then the applause began. Not the mocking laughter of a century past, but genuine respect and appreciation. Beings from 400 worlds clapped and clicked and hummed their approval. The sound filled the great chamber like music. Ambassador Kethis rose slowly from his seat. His movements were stiff with age, but his eyes still sparkled with the curiosity that had defined his long life. He had been watching humanity since the very beginning. He had seen them grow from frightened newcomers to confident leaders. I have lived for a very long time, he said, his voice thin but clear. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species reach the stars and then fade into extinction. But I have never seen anything like humanity. You are chaos and order, destruction and creation, despair and hope. You are everything at once. And somehow, against all logic, you make it work. He looked directly at Christopher. Your great-grandfather stood in this chamber 100 years ago and made a silent promise. I saw it in his eyes that day. Today, his great-grandson stands in the same spot, and that promise has been kept. Humanity did not merely prove us wrong. You showed us a better way to be. The old Velthari sat back down. He had said what he wanted to say. Outside the great station, the stars continued their eternal dance. The galaxy was at peace. The Hollow had not returned since that great battle 50 years ago. Driven back by weapons that humans and aliens had developed together. New worlds were being settled. New species were being welcomed. The future that Christopher had spoken of was already beginning. On a planet thousands of light years from Earth, a human child was being born. She would grow up on a world that had not existed when Daniel Hayes first traveled to the Council. She would live in a galaxy where humans and aliens worked side by side, where the word primitive was no longer used to dismiss young species, where potential was celebrated rather than judged. She would never know about the laughter. She would never feel the shame that her ancestors had carried. She would only know a universe of endless possibility, and that was exactly as it should be. In his private quarters after the ceremony, Christopher Hayes looked out a window at the stars. He thought about his great-grandfather. He thought about Lisa Morgan and Patricia Wells and all the others who had carried the weight of galactic scorn so that future generations would not have to. We did it, he said softly to the darkness. We proved them all wrong. The stars twinkled back at him. Somewhere out there, humanity was building, exploring, dreaming. Always dreaming. The galaxy had laughed at humans once. They would never laugh again.